Roastar Coffee Packaging, our favorite presenting sponsor, found online at roastar.com, prints great-looking bags for a host of your favorite coffee companies. Companies of all sizes trust Roastar to produce the packages worthy of their specialty craft coffee bean. At Roastar, it's their mission, it's their ethos, to help their customers tell their stories, big or small. Head to roastar.com to learn more about their quick turnaround times, digital printing, and small print runs. You can also use their new design lab to create an entirely new package in the blink of an eye. In short, Roastar can help you. And on roastar.com, you can start with a quote and end with the perfect coffee bag to share your story. Now, on to the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the Coffee People Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Woldt. This show is presented by Roastar Coffee Packaging, found online at roastar.com. They also do packaging for sweets and chocolates and snacks and that sort of thing, but coffee is their primary game. This show, the Coffee People Podcast, is part of our Roast West Coast Coffee Network. You can go to roastwestcoast.com to find recaps of this show and our Coffee Smarter podcast, and so much more. If you're tuning in and you haven't poured yourself a fine cup of coffee yet, now is the time to get started on that. Today, we're chatting with Brad Lepper, founding president of Council Oak Supply Company in Sioux City, Iowa. And by today, I mean literally I spoke to him months ago. He was actually the very first interview I did for season 12 back in September. And somehow, this has ended up being the last episode we're releasing in Season 12. I can't explain, other than there was a calendar snafu, a load of content that we brought in, and then a weird anxiety about opening this file. It was an entrepreneurial mental health roadblock I set up for myself, and more on that later. In the short term, there's no way for me to truly apologize to Brad for the delay in releasing our chat, other than to encourage you to head to counciloaksupply.com on the internet. Check out all the services they offer other coffee businesses, and maybe buy a few bags of their coffee. I've had it, and I'd definitely have it again. Today, though, I'm drinking the very last espresso shot of Yeah No Yeah coffee that I have on my shelf. Link to that coffee collaboration with Relative Coffee out of Minneapolis is in the show notes. I know I'm biased, but obviously I'm a huge fan. This espresso shot is so creamy, and a blend of sweet and salt and bitter and everything perfect about coffee. So it's been a minute since we got started, and by now you should have coffee in your cup. I did warn you at the top to get started. If you don't, that's on you. But you still have just one more second before this Coffee People conversation with Brad Lepper of Council Oak Supply Company in Sioux City, Iowa.
Yeah, my name is Brad Lepper, and I'm with Council Oak Supply, and we're a coffee roaster, cafe supply distributor, kind of a one-stop shop for cafes with all their supply and equipment needs, and we're based out of Sioux City, Iowa.
Sioux City, Iowa, which I just was in this summer. I got a chance to stop and see you, and I'm going to ask you about a bunch of your background and all of that stuff. But before we do, I want to point out that you have the most beautiful building, and I know that you were pretty instrumental in the renovation and the finding of that building and everything. It's a big brick building in Sioux City. I'm wondering, and I'll share photos if anyone's listening on the newsletter and that sort of thing, but could you tell me what it was like to walk into that building before anything was done? And were you
Yeah,
able to see, this beautiful future?
yeah, we got lucky that the top floor of kind of the main portion of the building had never really had anything done to it. So when you would walk in the front door back when we were looking at it, it was all infilled with 1950s era offices and tile, like the asbestos tile flooring, and it just it looked like every plumbing warehouse in the 50s. But we kind of wound around and went upstairs, and it was the old original brick walls, and you could see the original wood posts and the original wood floor that was certainly dirty, but you could see what it was. And so that was where it's like, oh, this building could be quite a bit more than it is today. And I don't think at the time I necessarily understood the full scope of what that would entail and how much work it would take. But we're very happy with the way it ended up, and we're blessed to be in a facility like this.
From the time that you walked in and you signed the paperwork and this building is yours to the point you're at now, where you walk in, you have this beautiful tasting room and you can see a roaster off to the left, and then you have your office spaces upstairs. How long was that process?
We bought it. It would have been. I remember it was like January, I think of 21 that we bought it, and so we worked on it basically for about 17 months of renovations here. So it was a lengthy amount of time. It could have gone faster, but like you alluded to earlier, we did a lot of the work ourselves, and I spent many hours chipping plaster off the wall and tearing lath and plaster off of the ceiling, and went home far too dirty many days in a row. But yeah, it was a long process, but it turned out great. And we love it.
That old saying about blood, sweat, and tears becomes more real when you do the work yourself,
It
in a literal
does.
sense, in some
It
case.
does.
Well, let's rewind a little bit, Brad. I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit of background, who you are and if you have a first memory or experience with coffee that made you kind of think this is an interesting world. I'm going to see where this goes.
Yeah, my first memory with coffee would be one that made me think I never want to drink this, which is growing up in rural Iowa with grandparents on both sides that farmed. And so the coffee pot was put on at around 3:30 in the morning, and there were multiple batches of either green or red Folgers cans that I can recall as a kid, and so that was my first experience with coffee, and it wasn't a great one. And so for most of my life, I would have casual coffees at Starbucks and get way too much sugar put in it to make it palatable. But I didn't ever really get into specialty coffee until later in life when I got into the real estate business with some apartment buildings and that thing, and kind of started my entrepreneur journey there. And then I ended up buying a little laundromat, and then came across an old Burger King that had closed down not far from our little house here in Sioux City, and thought it would make a great spot for a laundromat. But it had a drive-through, obviously, as a Burger King. And so I reached out to lots of different people to see if somebody else wants to put a coffee shop in and run it. And I called down to my aunt who lived down in Lincoln, Nebraska, and she had a coffee shop down there at the time. And so I called her to say, hey, why don't you come up here and run a shop? And she said, no, I don't think that's the right move for me, but you should get in the coffee business. And there's a fellow in town, his name is Nick Toff. You should go talk to him. And so I met with Nick, who's now my business partner here. And he made me my first quality latte and made some latte art and kind of walked us through the process and the numbers and how it worked. And like any young entrepreneur, I said to myself, I can do this, not knowing what I didn't know. And just school of hard knocks, just jumped in and just went to work. And so, yeah, that's kind of how my initial memories of coffee and turning into what it is now, they don't really jive very well. But it was really the business of coffee and the hospitality side and the artistry side and the design, and then the industrial side of the engineering and the precision of the equipment and all of that that really kind of pulled me in and made this my full-time career now.
What is your role at Council of Supply? And if you wouldn't mind, I have this Stone Brew is also or was your
Yeah,
company, that original Burger King, right?
that's right. Yeah,
It was Stone Brew Coffee, which is still that brand still exists, but you're also now Council Oak.
correct.
How do those two work together, and what is your role in this current iteration of it?
Yeah, so this is all kind of my fault. I started Stone Brew with a friend of mine named Robbie Jennings, and then another friend of mine named Jeff Boonstra. And so we started Stone Brew back in 2015. So from there, we opened up. We had about 5 cafes that we had built over roughly, let's call it a 6, 7 year span. And then we ended up starting to roast back in 2019, just supplying for ourselves. And that was about the time that Nick came on as a partner. And so once we started to roast our own coffee, that's when we started to look at distributing other products, and started self-distributing Tarani, and then started distributing a few other products out to other cafes. And then that business, kind of the distribution and wholesale side, really took off. And last year, right around this time, it had grown to basically match what we were doing with our cafes as far as sales and volume. We had a foot on two skis, and they were kind of going in different directions, and we had to choose which one that made the most sense for our skills. And so we made the decision to sell the Stone Brew Cafe brand to another local family. And so we still continue to roast for them and supply products to them and so forth. But they are two separate companies. And now this company that I'm a part of, I'm the president of the company, that we, with Council Oak Supply, we're really exclusively a wholesale partner for other people running their own cafes, and like to come alongside them and help them run better operations.
Sure, you've been there.
Yeah.
You mentioned Nick Top a few times. I've had the pleasure of meeting him, and a great coffee person, great coffee human.
Yeah.
Seemingly a little dangerous behind the handlebars of a bicycle
Or a trampoline.
or a trampoline. How does that partnership, and I guess the question I'm really getting towards isn't about Nick specifically, but about you, and how did
Yeah.
you find partners that you felt matched your skill sets and you were like, hey, they can take on these things that I don't know, and I have these skills that they might not know, and I think they're going to work together? Because it's like a marriage. You don't know
Absolutely.
what you don't know, right? You don't know how they're going to react under pressure in certain situations. How has that developed over the last couple of years?
Nick and I had a relationship for those years that I was working at Stone Brew, where he was basically our sales rep for our roaster that we started with. And so we had a good working relationship for several years before we became partners. And so through that, we got to know each other and kind of knew each other's skill sets. And I always defer to Nick on the more technical coffee issues. He's the head roaster here and really kind of dials in the quality and the sourcing on that side. And I'm, as coming from the real estate and laundromat and mini storage, I'm just more of general business knowledge and marketing and branding. So just, yeah, we really have very different sets of skills. If you spend time with us, you'll see that we have very different personalities, different communication styles. But this, in the same way that in a marriage that opposites attract, it can be the same way in business relationships, where you can find another person who really, that you complement each other, and you're able to kind of pick different roles in the company and work together well. And it's been going great so far.
The coffee side of Council Oak, you fall into that specialty craft coffee community, but you're also providing wholesale uh, and connecting with other coffee businesses. Is your clientele primarily in Iowa? I mean, what is Iowa like as a craft community location?
It's certainly growing. When we started Stone Brew in Sioux City back in the day, it was there was basically one other coffee shop in town that was making espresso based beverages, and that was a place called Pier Street Coffee Works, and they're still open here in town and run a great business. But we were kind of, I would say, the second into that game here, and now there's several in our community, and we've seen a lot of smaller towns really pop up with coffee shops and cafes that we're starting to catch up to what may exist more in the coastal portions of our country, where I think they're probably, let's call it 10 to 15 years ahead of us in coffee culture. But there are certain areas or certain shops that, for instance, I think of like Archetype down in Omaha is doing tremendous things. Isaiah and the crew down there, and there's a few shops down in Des Moines that are doing really high level stuff. You have shops in Sioux Falls and Minneapolis, obviously. So there's definitely some really bright spots of people doing really cool stuff. But that's starting to kind of work its way out more into the rural communities, and we're trying to help that happen.
You mentioned your grandparents, farmers on both sides. I had farmers on both sides as well growing up in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Corn, dairy.
It was corn and soybeans, and my grandpa on my mom's side had sheep actually, and had some hogs growing up, and so I remember he always used to have to put a bucket on the ram's head when he'd go feed the sheep, and so I have many fond memories on the farm of baling hay and those types of things.
I just remember being at the farm and my cousins taking great joy in me having to wake up early with them so that someone else could empathize with what they went through every day.
Yeah,
The reason I bring up the farming component of it and Iowa and the Midwest in particular is it's already a community of makers. They wouldn't
hmm,
necessarily refer to themselves as that, at least in my grandparents' generation, but it's people who are comfortable working with their hands and figuring out problems. And so
exactly.
there's a little bit of a rant on my side of things, everyone. I know Brad's the guest here, but I find that the people who are getting into things like craft coffee have a knack or they have a desire to work through the problems maybe longer than somebody who is just like, oh, this is a cool industry. I think I can make some money because they
Yeah,
have this kind of ingrained desire to build. Do you see that with the community that you're working with?
for sure. And a farmer might not admit to this or see this in what they do if you were to ask them right up front. But there's a bit of artistry, there's craftsmanship, there's creativity, there's ingenuity. All of those things go into to farming. In order to improve the operation, but also in rural communities. And there's a lot of farmers that really take pride in the way that their farm looks and the quality of their product. And I know, like, my grandpa would walk the end rows of his fields and would pull weeds because he didn't want the other farmers driving by and seeing weeds in his field. And so there's that kind of presentation aspect of it as well, and branding, that these are all things that are existing in these farm operations that maybe don't immediately or easily reference each other in like a hospitality business, but it's the same mindset and it's the same way of thinking in really any entrepreneurial endeavor. And farmers are kind of the OG entrepreneurs.
I think people that grow up in farming communities or near them, where they're passing through them, even if they're not part of that, have a bit more awareness than the rest of the larger population about where food comes from,
Oh
generally
yeah,
speaking.
yeah.
And I'm wondering if that perspective impacts your sourcing of coffee at Council Oak. Is that something you guys discuss because you have an awareness of what's happening on the other side of that?
Yeah, we purchase nearly 100% of our product is certified organic. Most of it is also fair trade certified. And these are things that just help us tell the story to the people that we sell to, the cafes that we provide to, that they can feel comfortable and confident that everybody from the farmers to the mills, that everybody was treated reasonably fairly in the process of getting that coffee to them. And so I think that that's understanding the amount of work and effort that it takes to grow a crop and harvest it and take it to market and deal with the fluctuations in the commodities markets and the unknowns of the weather. Yeah, we understand what the producers go through, and hope to honor them with how we purchase and how we roast their coffee and how we sell.
You've started offering up education, YouTube channel, and I know that was something we kind of briefly chatted about in person. Just kind of a desire to share some of the things you've learned. What motivates that? Why add that onto your plate of all the things that you're already doing?
Yeah, I'm really passionate about cafes and about the business of coffee shops, and I think it's an area that is kind of underserved in our industry, which is really the business side of what we do. If you want to watch a video about how to dial an espresso, and you type that into YouTube, you're going to see all kinds of different content there. But if somebody's wanting to understand how to dial in their cost of goods sold or save money on labor or how to effectively market their shop, those types of things, that information is maybe not as readily available. And that's the side of it that I'm most passionate about. So it's something that I'll talk about for free to no end. And so it just made sense that it would be something that I would make an effort to create some content and hope to provide some value to people in that area.
What are skills you think serve an entrepreneur? I noticed that outside of coffee, when I Google you, I come up with all these links for lifting, powerlifting, I think was the thing. But I'm wondering, what are things that you've learned that you think are essential for somebody just starting out and dreaming of that coffee shop?
Um, I think you have to be creative. You have to be a self motivator. Having an idea to do something, that you kind of get that period where you have kind of this high of the idea, you just really ride that wave. But that wave inevitably kind of comes down, and you've got to continue to work through that, right? Um, so I think being a self starter, somebody who's self motivated, willing to learn, curious, and I think has a genuine passion to provide service to people and to take care of people. Like hospitality is so important in this business that if it doesn't kind of make your heart smile when you give somebody a great latte and you see them enjoy that first sip, if that isn't something that you find enjoyable, then I think you're going to have a hard time sticking it out in this business. That you really need to find enjoyment in that day-to-day activity of serving people and giving them something of value. Kind of a long-winded answer to that, but yeah, I think all of the things that it takes to be a great coffee operator are in those things.
Well, I think it's an interesting comment to say that you have the high. As a burgeoning entrepreneur, you have to qualify your own ideas. Is
Yeah.
this an idea that I'm going to be able to sustain even when the high is gone? And that can
Yes.
be hard to be honest with yourself about, when you get excited about something. At least for me,
Yeah. Absolutely.
I have notebooks filled with ideas that I didn't follow through on because they weren't the right one for whatever reason. But in the moment that I wrote it down, I know I was thinking, "Oh, this is it. This is the thing."
Yep. There's a great book on that, by the way. It's called The Dip. I think Seth Godin wrote it. It's called The Dip, DIP, and he talks about that in entrepreneurship that you kind of have to understand that are you in that dip before you start to climb, or are you heading for a cliff that goes nowhere? And identifying if you're just going through that hard phase right before the thing takes off and being willing to push through it, or recognizing if it's not the right fit for you. So if anybody that's listening to this is kind of struggling with those questions, I highly recommend that book.
Yeah, and I'll link to that as well in our newsletter. I know I mentioned it before, but I was just so impressed when I was in your space at the care and the thought that was put into that building. What came out of that process, or what did you learn if about renovating an old building and keeping this history alive to some extent, but giving it a new life? I have to imagine that some surprises popped up in that you weren't prepared for.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think doing a renovation is a lot like, I don't know, like carving in rock or something like that, where you have an idea of what you want it to look like or what you think it can look like, but as you start the process, you uncover things in that process that completely change how it ends up, and it's kind of a journey of you just seeing what positive and negative surprises come in that process. Because I really I did not envision the space that's there now when we started the project. I remember when we made the decision to make the windows bigger, and the first time I saw one of those openings cut out and I could see, like, now we can see all of downtown and all the light that came in, that it was just such a great moment. And I remember when we pulled the lath and plaster down and sandblasted the old timbers and how well they cleaned up. I had no idea that they would clean up that well. It was just kind of a happy accident of just kind of working your way through it and finding those gems. So yeah, in those processes, I think you just kind of have to see there's a base level of possibilities in a building or in a project, and then you just got to go to work and uncover them and not be option blind. Seeing options when they come to you, and being flexible with your vision for the project and seeing an opportunity to make a little change that really makes a positive benefit in the end.
How does Council Oak fit into the greater coffee community? You serve, and what I'm asking, I think, is to clarify what is it that you're providing to coffee businesses besides just wholesale coffee? You mentioned that you became a distributor, What does that entail for people listening that might be in that world or in that market, in that community, thinking, I want to do this?
Yeah, so we're a place that if you show up with a big enough vehicle, you can drive away with a coffee shop. Everything from the coffee to the cups to the lids to the equipment. You literally could leave our building with a functioning coffee shop. And so we've tried and bring our experience in building multiple cafes and running them for years to help people who are either completely new to the coffee business or people who have maybe just jumped in and haven't had much time to network in the community to hopefully bring them not only good products that we feel good standing behind and that we're confident in the value of those products, but also how to use them and how to get the best value out of those and make the best product in their cafe and hopefully grow their sales and provide themselves with a good living. So I think that's we're passionate about the coffee, but more important, or I would say equally, or maybe a little bit more, we're passionate about the people. Like we don't make great coffee for the sake of the coffee in the cup. We make great coffee so that the person who enjoys it gets that experience, right? It's that connection between people. It's that human experience that we really value and we get excited about. And coffee is a channel to get there. So we try and bring the experience and the products and those things to help people start and run better coffee shops.
You've been continually pushing forward in your entrepreneurial career. When I look at the timeline from laundromat to multiple cafes to Council Oak Supply, it's fairly quick. What does the future of Council Oak Supply look like to you?
Yeah, I think we keep growing. We've doubled pretty much every year that we've been in existence, and this year will be close to that. So we're having a good year. I think we've been largely a regional player, but we're starting now with our shipping relationships to really kind of branch out across the country. That we're serving shops in Texas and Louisiana and Tennessee and Pennsylvania, and I talked to one in Arizona today. So we're not just handling, Iowa and the immediate surrounding states. We're kind of branching out nationwide and trying to build systems. Not only we moved all of our ordering online, so all of our catalog and all of our account management is all done through our website now. And then we've also developed stronger relationships with our shipping partners that almost all of the Midwest for us is an overnight delivery that is a part of our standard shipping, and we're roughly 2 to 3 days for almost all the rest of the country. So just kind of continuing to try and build relationships and expand out from just regionally here around Sioux City.
That's always something that I think gets overlooked when people are starting coffee businesses in the Midwest. There's this extra shipping effort to get coffee from a port somewhere into your location.
Yeah,
And that adds time and a little bit of expense, and how you work around that is a I was going to say strategy, but it's just another business concern you got to think about in that location. Every geography will have its own challenges. When you're out and about and a new coffee shop opens up, they probably bought supplies from you in Sioux City or nearby, but you go there for the first time. What are you going to order?
it depends. If they have pour over, I might try that. I always, coming from my background of not being a sophisticated coffee drinker, I still love a great mocha. So I always kind of will judge some of those things on that. But I'm you can't typically nail me down on an individual drink. What I drink every day here is I love to do a triple shot 12-ounce latte with honey and a little bit of cinnamon. And that's my morning jam. But there's always lots of other caffeine opportunities that pop up through the day. And it's funny because it's like I know that in third wave coffee and in all that coffee is, that adding something like honey to your coffee might be frowned upon by some people, but it's kind of the journey that I went on, and if I get the same drink every time, besides drinking the espresso straight, it helps me to make sure that the flavor is correct and that the shot tastes well balanced. And I can get that with drinking a straight shot of espresso, but I don't enjoy that as much as I do with the milk. with the steam milk and with a little bit of that sweetness added to it. So I guess I don't make too many apologies for enjoying the coffee the way I enjoy it.
And that Midwestern honey is pretty damn good. I'll have to
We
get you
use
some
that.
from our family beehives.
That'd be awesome.
Did I miss anything today that you want people to know about you, about this effort that you're putting forth?
Yeah, if people feel so inclined, they can follow me on. I'm on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. Just look up Brad Lepper. It's me, and then there's a fellow with the same name who's a hardcore archaeologist out of Ohio. So don't get confused. Unless you're into archaeology, then that might be a great find. But yeah, I'm the coffee guy. So yeah, people can follow on there, and if there's anything we can do to help them out in their cafes, or if they have questions about starting up coffee shops. I'm always happy to take phone calls and emails and have conversations on the topic.
Brad, I really appreciate you taking some time this afternoon to chat with me on the show, and I feel like I got more advice out of you than I normally would ask out of someone, but it's only because when I talk to you, I think this is a guy who kind of knows how to get stuff done. So I certainly appreciate the time.
Well, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, some of the key takeaways are going to be shared here, but head to roastwestcoast.com to see some more context and links in the newsletter. Last season, season 11, George Vukasin of Peerless Coffee was making a point about how it is a lot easier to find a good to great cup of coffee, even in a small community in a place like Iowa. Much easier than it used to be, much more like it is when you head to a larger metropolis with lots of options. My family and I put that to the test each summer as we drive across the country. This last summer, we actually did stop for coffee in Iowa, specifically at Council Oak Supply in Sioux City. And I can attest that George was right. You can definitely get a great cup of coffee in Iowa. When I was passing through, I had one brewed by Brad's partner at Council Oak, Nick Topf. That coffee was good. And the building. What a lovely piece of architecture. But back to our show. Brad's first memory was a common one. He tasted a Folgers at the family farm, and it wasn't for him. It was only later in life, when he had become an entrepreneur, that he was introduced to specialty coffee. He purchased that old Burger King building to turn into a laundromat, but the building came with a drive-through window, which he thought might work as a cafe. When he couldn't find an operator, his aunt suggested that he do it himself, and introduced him to Nick, his now partner in Council Oak Supply. At Council Oak, they roast coffee, and they distribute equipment as a wholesaler, in addition to operating their own tasting space. It is a key to a successful business relationship to find a partner who complements and perhaps enhances your skills, as Brad has done with his business partner and the head roaster, Nick Topf. Beyond just his own business, Brad is passionate about the business of coffee shops, and it's inspired him to start sharing his knowledge to a wider audience, primarily through YouTube. Some skills and character traits that he finds essential to success in the industry include being creative, willing to learn, self-motivation, and being able to ride the wave up and down as you provide service to others. At Council Oak, they sell everything from coffee to the cups and lids to the machinery, and then they spend the time to teach their customers how to effectively and efficiently use it all. Brad joked that if someone had a big enough truck, they could leave their building with an entire coffee shop in the back. At Council Oak, they're passionate about coffee, and equally, if not more so, passionate about the people behind it. Finally, to clarify, Brad Lepper is not the archaeologist with the same name. He's the coffee guy. You can learn more about Council Oak Supply online at counciloaksupply.com or follow their social media at Council Oak Supply. You'll find all the links in this podcast episode's show notes or in our online newsletter at roastwestcoast.com, where we'll also share Brad's YouTube channel and some photos from our visit to Iowa. And that's our show for today, and the conclusion of another season of Coffee People. Interviews for Season 13 are already on the calendar, and many of them will be available as video podcasts on Spotify or our burgeoning YouTube channel. If you've enjoyed or been inspired by an episode of Coffee People, it really helps us if you tap the follow button on this show and give us a few stars on whatever platform you're listening to us. If you want to go beyond to support the Coffee People podcast, one of the best ways to support the show is to tell a friend, share this episode, or share one of our newsletters from roastwestcoast.com. Here at Roast West Coast and the Coffee People podcast, we are supported by Roastar Coffee Packaging, which you find online at roastar.com. They're our presenting sponsor, and they'll help you tell the big story of your small business. It's because of them that we can continue to share the stories of Coffee People. We also use bags produced by Roastar for our Relative Coffee collab, Yeah. And the bags look as good as the coffee tastes, which is dang good, if I do say so myself. You can design your own bag on roastar.com. We're also grateful to our other industry partners, in particular, Hasea Coffee Source Green Coffee Importers, Maria Coffee, Crossings Coffee, and Cape Horn Green Coffee. Thank you for listening to and sharing this podcast. I mentioned at the top entrepreneurial and anxiety roadblocks that sometimes we set forth for ourselves, or at least I do. And I know that that's something that I'm working through as we go through this big expansion in 2025. Sometimes there's just something that, for whatever reason, gets stuck, and you have to work through it. I know that when I finally opened this file and I started working on this interview with Brad, it was like a weight had lifted from my shoulders, and I realized there was nothing to be afraid of. It was a great chat, and I'm excited that you're all finally listening to it. Once again, I'm sorry to Brad for taking so long. That's on me. To the rest of you, we'll see you next season, season 13. This episode has been written, produced, researched, and recorded by me, Ryan Woldt. This show, the Coffee People podcast, is part of our Roast West Coast Coffee Network. And wherever you find yourself today, I hope it's with a fine cup of coffee, keeping you company. Thank you for listening to us share the stories of Coffee People. If you are in the early stages of your coffee journey, we want to support you. Check out the Coffee Smarter Education podcasts. Coffee Smarter is designed to enable coffee drinkers to brew a better cup of coffee at home. And Coffee Smarter Pro covers industry-specific topics for baristas, roasters, shop owners, and aspiring coffee professionals. You'll find both shows on your favorite podcast platforms or on our website at coffeesmarterpodcast.com.